I built this shit. Me. Brick by brick. And I'll be damned if I let you tear it down just because you don't like the way another talk. Drive, motherfucker!
Now, Franklin built his empire brick by brick, but not without the help of his trusted family Louis, Jerome, Sissy, and Leon. But the evolution of Franklin Sane started with a young character who needed to find the best of both worlds, and he did with their system, but his way. But Franklin's evolution and journey has been filled with a lot of hurt, trouble, gang wars, wrong decisions, and a lot of loss of loved ones along the way. And this has contributed towards a cold and ruthless Franklin Saint that we've witnessed grow over 4 seasons, and also the one that we saw return towards the end of season 4, but also the one we're now going to see in season 5. But he's also showed his vulnerable side throughout the series, so in this video we're going to run through all things Franklin Sane in this character analysis. Now, in the first season of Snowfall, we were introduced to a Franklin Sane who was a young innocent kid who gets caught up in the cocaine business with his best friend who lives by the valley, Leon. And we had him telling Harvey, front me a key and I'll turn it around quick, who saw something in Franklin, and we're gonna see him telling Franklin that this young man has a war inside, and he very well saw the potential that Franklin had. Now, Franklin's development from a straight college kid to a cunning, vicious, and ruthless businessman is mesmerizing, and from time to time we were constantly reminded he was just a kid in a vicious, unforgiving world where there were consequences for all his actions, and where lives are constantly at stake in every direction. Franklin was introduced to the life he was just about to enter, showing his vulnerable and innocent side, and he was brutally beat up after his second drop to Claudia at the end of episode 2. And as I said, a kid in a vicious and unforgiving world, and this is where he asked for Uncle Jerome's help, asking him for a piece. But Jerome reminded him, in this world, if you pull it and hesitate, then that's your funeral, and in this game, there can't be any loose ends, which is why he had to take Manboy out. And all it could have took was a rookie mistake from Franklin at the beginning, and his life would have been over in the blink of an eye, as he enters a world that even Jerome didn't want to enter at that moment in time. But he told Jerome that this game's rigged, it ain't made for people like us, so I'm rewriting the rules. But it wasn't Jerome who helps him, it's his trusted left hand, Aunt Louie, who showed why she was so valuable to Franklin. And Aunt Louie, time after time, showed us why she's the glue to Franklin's organization, and the one Franklin turns to for advice. This started at the very beginning of Franklin's journey, from Louis helping Franklin offload his first brick to Claudia in the very first episode, to even taking over business when Franklin was shot by Mel, holding it down with Reed. But Snowfall is a tale of what the crack epidemic did to South Central Los Angeles in the 1980s, and also what it did to the people and the communities. And Franklin Saint's idea was to help the community and build something, but at what cost? He takes a trip to Oakland, but the coke becomes a new high, The Rock, and it's what starts to make Franklin some serious money. And by the end of the second season, we were introduced to a new Franklin Saint, who's learning the game, and starts to learn how to handle his money and how to manage a crew, but it also backfires when he becomes a little negligent, which leads to tensions in his crew. Now, Franklin wasn't in the business for violence, gang wars, but the business and line of work that he's in, it was inevitable that at some point, he was going to be in the thick of the action, having to make a life or death situation, just like he did with Kevin, and he had to assert his authority at the beginning of the season, when Kevin pointed his gun in Franklin's face, with Leon stepping in front. Now, with Franklin slightly tilting his head in a show of power, in essence telling Kevin, what are you gonna do, without having to exactly say the words. But Franklin wanted to avoid a gang war so bad, he shot Kevin and sacrificed his best friend, albeit shot in the leg, without the intentions of killing him. And he eventually learned the consequences of his actions, because he found himself lined up with other inmates in prison, and he was also denied bail. And the stark realities about where he was hit home, and it definitely hit home in the episode title Education, because this was a life lesson that would definitely remain with him forever. And we saw Franklin portray anxiety, fear, vulnerability, and a defeated look as Ray Ray and his crew gave him a crew lesson. And facing Jerome and Leon in one of the most passionate and one of my all-time favorite scenes of Snowfall showed how defeated Franklin was at this moment, and it was only until he came face to face with his mother Sissy and his father did he realize that he needed to take action and claim his place, and first by claiming the shoes that were taken by another inmate. And this was followed up by him facing up to Ray Ray to tell him that if his crew stepped up to him again, his family would face the consequences on the outside. So Franklin experiencing this vicious and unforgiving life in prison, knowing that stepping up was his only choice and chance of survival, and with the help of Reed he was able to escape a free man and realize that prison is the last place he wants to be again. But Franklin's path is clear in season 3, with Franklin still a young kid, this time a lot more wiser, a lot more ambitious, and a lot more cutthroat and ruthless. So we see him beginning to work with Teddy, knowing that he's some sort of government official with a lot of power, because of the way he helped him to beat the murder rap, and how he's helped him to be in a position where he's at the top. but also one where he's in the midst of a different kind of problem. A problem where the drug that made him the kingpin is affecting those closest around him, and those around him especially catching the attention of Andre, and he desperately wanted to be the one to bring Franklin Saint and his empire down. Because Andre realized what the crack was doing to the community and the people around them, and he believed that it was his duty to keep his community safe. And Franklin and Andre were involved in a deep chess game in season 3, and one which Franklin ultimately came out on top. Or did he? Let's rewind it back and look at what played out between the two across season 3. Now Andre is disgusted with every effect that the crack has had on their community, because he was seeing what it was doing more than anyone, and he stands so strongly against the drug and Franklin, who was responsible for bringing the drug to the neighborhood and the community. And the police, which were led by Andre, brutally attacked Jerome, which was actually a reference to the gang raids and that the LAPD conducted before the 1984 Olympics, and in response to Franklin's playing his chess moves by having one of Louis' old pals stealing his gun and badge, which resulted in his suspension from the police. And that was despite all of his recent success. And this was a harsh reminder for Andre that despite all his efforts and success, the game is still rigged, and more so when he was beaten in a traffic stop, and the end was definitely near for Andre, but not before Andre could witness Franklin's drug take Mel. And in Leon's words, once the rock gets you, the person you knew, they're gone. And Mel's downfall and addiction was the first time Franklin really saw the effects that it was having on the people that he cared for. Someone who I thought was going to be Franklin's ride or die, and with Franklin till the very end. But this drug dismantled her life, and it's easy for Franklin to sell these drugs because he treats it as a business, and he's just giving the people what they want. But when it takes over someone you love and care for, that's when you see Franklin taken aback for the first time. And despite their relationship being hot and cold, he still cared for her, bringing her back home. But it wasn't enough for Andre to stop coming after Franklin, and he was never going to stop coming after him after his latest discovery. But Franklin gave him every opportunity to disappear. He wanted to give Andre a chance to get out of town with Mel, make it out alive while he could. But Andre's morality took over. He wasn't going to stand by and let Franklin destroy the community. He wanted to go head to head with Franklin in this chess game and bring him down. But this is the cold, vicious, and ruthless character that Franklin had become, and he showed us in this moment exactly what he's capable of and what this drug, power, and greed has done to him, but also how he had to face the consequences as Mel shot him because she knew he was the one who was responsible for Andre's death. So as we come into season 4, he was someone who was very much in recovery, and the season involved a lot of mistakes, betrayal, and loyalty, even from those close to him, with T being someone who was always working with Manboy. Franklin was someone who had issues across the board, with Leon who didn't want to do anything for Franklin at the beginning. There was also Louis and Jerome, who wanted out of the game, but they also knew they were stuck, because they were working for Reed, who was government. But it also started with him having a gang war on his hands, and him having to pick a side, and ultimately choosing the wrong side with Manboy, because he's someone who Louis warned Franklin about. Now Manboy was someone who was always after more territory, more product, and more respect, and sooner or later he would have wanted more control than he had. And we even saw him trying to find out who the Connect was, and ultimately when he found out T was working with Manboy, there was only ever going to be one outcome, and this was just one of a lot of big decisions that Franklin had to make across the season. We also saw him shutting down Alton's homeless shelter, and even taking away the bookstore from this couple, and this was in essence Franklin going against everything he wanted to do, which was help his community. But he also suffered his fair share of setbacks, because he had Leb quit on him, telling him that he wants to be no part of his war. There was also Fatback's death, Louis ending up in hospital, and his fight with Jerome, which showed why Jerome needed Franklin, but more importantly why they all needed each other, and why they needed to stick together. But something that will stick with Franklin as we now move into season 5 is Manboy's prophecy. He told Franklin that those close to him will turn on him, and we already know that Louis, Jerome, and Leon, they all want out from the game under Franklin Saint. But he's not someone who's willing to give up his control because he's got a dream. But his dream are not Louis' or Jerome's. But he knows himself as we move into season 5, competition is going to be high, and the profit margins, they're not going to be the same. So we're going to see him trying to build a clean, legal business with real estate, because things have definitely changed for him. He's now got a baby on the way, and he wants to protect his family. But we've all heard about the drug dealer who wants out of the game, and to go straight, it never quite works out this way, because we all know there is only two outcomes. You either end up dead or in jail. So what will Franklin Saint's fate be? Drop all your predictions down below for season 5 of Snowfall. And of course, if you're new to the channel and you haven't done so already, then remember to smash the subscribe button if you want to see everything Snowfall and Power Universe related. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.